Hello, and welcome to the Bitcoin Review podcast. This is an ad-free pod. Thank you so much for streaming those sats. If you're a new listener, I'm NVK, and I run CoinKite, where we've been helping people secure their Bitcoins for over a decade. We make products like the Code Card, the Block Lock, and we have a bunch of other projects. You can find more information on coinkite.com. I have some interesting guys here today, and we're all working on Nostr. You know, it's this new thing that seems to be taking the internet by storm. So why don't I intro today's panel? We have Fiatjaf.
Hey. Should I say something about me? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, why not? Just a tiny little bit. Fiat, do you want to just tell a little bit about yourself, like very, very short? Maybe we lost Fiat. Okay. We'll move on to JB.
It's better if you move on. I'm already trashing the show.
No, it's all good. All right. JB is working on Damos, which is one of the clients that's been well used right now. Hello, sir.
How's it going, guys?
Thanks for coming. And we have Jack. Jack built the competitor to Nostr. And he's gonna join us to add some color to this.
Yeah, awesome. Can't wait.
Okay, guys. So I think a good way to start, because like people have absolutely no idea what Nostr is. People are super confused. I kind of wanted to just give a very short explanation of what Nostr is. We can get into what it isn't later, and the state of development, like where we are now. So JB, I've seen you go around now like a few shows, and do you want to give like a elevator pitch about what Nostr is?
Sure, I'm on 3 hours of sleep, but I'll try. Yeah, so I always start off saying like, hey, Nostr is like a protocol, and the minute I say protocol, I feel like people's eyes glaze over a bit because it's like, okay, now this is some nerd talking to me. But I always try to say like, hey, well, we have these things called protocols, and like email is one example of these, and which we use day to day. So I always try to say like, okay, Nostr is the protocol for social media. So instead of like email clients, we have like, social clients. I always like to start with that because obviously we all know that Nostr is a little bit more than just social, but it's a good way to like ground people into something more concrete. So yeah, but I guess we can go into more detail further about what that entails, but that's how we always like to start.
Yeah, I think that's a good sort of like beginning, right? It's like we had a protocol for email, we had a protocol for other things, and Nostr now is like this really good protocol for many things, one of them being social media. Fiat, do you want to give like a quick update of like the state of development for Nostr?
Well, I don't know if there's a Nostr development. There's just a bunch of people making a bunch of clients, and Demos is the one that is most finished of them all. But yeah, there's no Nostr development. There's a lot of clients. People are making a lot of clients every day. I see 2 new ones, but everything is very, very not ready.
I love that. We can get into sort of like some of the nips and sort of like where things are and some of the very big open questions. And I guess Nostr was fairly unknown by a lot of people for quite some time, right? I mean, the project is like, close to 2 years old, but we had like a huge run up in users once Jack came onto the platform and started greeting every single person that comes in. So Jack, what brought you to this platform? Like, why Nostr?
Well, I tweeted out, just kind of a short post about some of the lessons learned from Twitter and work in Bitcoin, and committed to moving a bunch of, I have this, foundation called Start Small to give grants all over the world for a few particular problems that I care about, and opened a new category, which was, free software, open internet protocol development. And as I posted that and asked the question of where should some of these funds go, Nostr kept coming up in the replies. I'd seen mention of it before, briefly, but unfortunately back then, I don't know when it was, maybe a year ago, I didn't look deeply enough into it. But when I kept seeing it again, I went to the GitHub, I read the original MD, and it hit every single point that I had been, looking at and concerned with. And then I found a bunch of the clients. I played around with it. I found Damus and played around with that even more. And the more I played with it, the more I interacted with people, the more fun it became. And that plus the underlying fundamentals just made me really happy. And I wanted to do whatever I could to do to support it. So I had a brief conversation with Fiatjaf and William, and here we are.
Yeah, no, there is a special sort of feeling to this platform. I say in platform, not the protocol and not the client, because that feeling, at least right now, is coming from the social media use of it. It feels like the BBS days. It feels like a bit of the IRC days. It feels like we have people who are generally interested in building something new. Also similar to how Bitcoin started, it has certain stickiness to it. And I think, at least in my opinion, I can attribute this to, you don't need permission, right? You really don't need permission to participate in Nostr. And people who build software are coming in and like a torrent and building like clients and relays and different uses of it. So I guess like we can sort of maybe talk about like how do new protocols take off, right? Because everybody and their mother wants to build a new protocol. Everybody can sort of like design a completely complete protocol and have amazing documentation, and then nobody uses it, right? That's normally the fate of 99% of all protocols that have been ever created. Why is Nostr taking off in each of your opinions?
So like, I always like to compare it to, so you ran NVK, you ran the Bitcoin Hackers Mastodon, right?
Yeah.
So I'm kind of curious, what feels different about this compared to, let's say, the Mastodon? Because I was on ActivityPub for like a couple years just playing with it. Probably got banned from like 2 or 3 instances just for saying Bitcoin. But this does feel quite different. And I'm trying to figure out like why that is. Is it just the type of people who are joining it at this time? Is it the protocol itself that like enables a different type of interaction? Because I don't feel like I'm the need to censor myself or the need to worry about like the instant admin like banning me. So it's interesting how protocols could kind of shape kind of the dialogue itself, which I find fascinating. But
yeah, I mean, the medium is the message, right? It truly is. And people shape, at least in my view, their thoughts, their expression of themselves based on the medium that they use. You have the radio voice, you have how people write an email, you have how people write in DMs. It's all different because it's based on that medium. And what Jack created with Twitter was very interesting because it didn't exist before, right? Like it was the first time you had people able to send like little text messages publicly, right? Broadcast text messages in a way, and allow this sort of stream of conscious that's a little bit less constrained, but also super constraining in size. So you can sort of like consume a lot more. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is because, all the platforms out there, Twitter was the only one that it could do this, right? That it could broadcast something small in text. So like super high signal, even though it's like, I don't know, I'm walking my dog, right? Whatever. But like it's signal to people differs. And Mastodon is sort of like this thing where it's this massive bloat, right? The software is crap. The protocol is crap. I'm sorry. Like, I don't want to be rude to the original developers. I'm sure they put a lot of effort into it. But it's essentially just remaking centralization to feudalism, right? So now instead of having one lord, right? Now is Lord Elon. You have, whoever is running the Mastodon instance will often be the person who rules over, a few thousand people, right? I bump into that issue. For example, there were some people that I'm not interested in hosting their content. I'm like, I'm not going to block you from talking to my instance, but I don't want to host you, right? And people didn't understand quite it works, so I got some in hot water. So anyways, the point is, Mastodon just recreated the same stuff. My instance is blocked by every other instance on Mastodon universe because we don't do content moderation. I wanted people to be free to talk. And I'm hosting their data. I don't want to do that. I don't want to have people's stuff. I don't want to have their identity. I want people to have their own. I actually plan on closing bitcoinhackers.org. So that's sort of like where I am. Like, Jack, how do you feel about this?
I think you guys know, but like there's never any one single thing that forces this to be adopted or not. Like it's always a multivariable problem. But if I were forced to point to one thing, it would be the simplicity. It is just such a simple spec, a simple idea. And you pair that with the humility of the approach. I mean, Fiatjaf's original description of, this might have a chance of working sets the tone for everything. And because of that simplicity, like it's just so easy to start coding for it and start playing with it and actually like feel it. That was in the early days of Twitter. We had this, ultra open API, both, and that was both a positive and a negative. It was a positive in that, anyone, 14-year-old, 13-year-old could take the API, understand it, keep the majority of it in their head and start programming. And then they could actually send a message via SMS that would vibrate their phone. So there was this real like tangibility of like, this thing is alive. And it was a negative because it was way too open. We had no idea what we were doing in terms of APIs, and people went crazy, and we didn't rate limit. We were built on Ruby on Rails, which was the original sin, and we went down all the time. So what's different about this to me is you've maintained that simplicity. You've maintained this desire for developers to contribute and feel something almost instantaneously, especially over this past month, and I'm sure it was felt that way earlier as well. But now that you have more people, it just feels deeper and deeper and deeper, and the momentum around development will continue to grow because the protocol spec is just so simple and at the same time so open, so anyone can go to GitHub, see the source, see how it works, tinker a little bit, fix this, add this, and see it in front of people, and people give feedback on the protocol itself, which just like, again, creates this incredible momentum that pushes it further and further and further. And the speed at which people are seeing change, I think is somewhat addictive. And the knowledge that if I don't like this change, I can just write my own or fork my own client and do it in the way that I wish is even more compelling.
Fiat, I think you were going to add a comment there.
Yeah, I was going to say about Mastodon that I think it was created as a toy thing that mimicked Twitter, and then they decided after the fact to add federation.
I see. That makes sense. It never felt like it was glued to everything else. I think to Jack's point there, protocols that are too opinionated are less likely to find other people that want to use it, right? Because people who have their own opinions, and if it's too opinionated, it's going to interfere with their opinions. So nobody ends up using it, right? That is all fine when you have, say, corporations that enter a consortium or something, and then, like they want to have it all specced out, and, but when you're building something that is truly decentralized and you don't need permission to come in, I think the value really is on that simplicity. And the motto of this is for people to have a identity based on a key pair, which to me was like absolutely beautiful design choice, very similar to Bitcoin. So you have this anonymous system where people can publish something, right? In the case of Nostr as an event, and then everybody else in the world, in the universe that's connected to you somehow can see that, provided that it's not encrypted content, but they can still see the event.
Yeah. I just think to Jack's point, this idea of simplicity and how I think that's like underestimated sometimes, and just in terms of like how quickly developers can get on board. Exactly what Jack was saying. And I've studied like a lot of protocols, and it's kind of fun just going to go through a lot of large protocol documents. But a lot of the time, they're actually quite hard to interact with. Like if you look at a lot of the standard internet protocols, they're actually quite large and complicated. Like even just the WebSockets protocol. So when I first found Nostr, I was just like, it was just so refreshing, and the fact that I was able to just build a client in an afternoon, that was such a powerful experience just for me personally. And I'm like, wow, like. So I think this idea of like simple protocols is something that hasn't even really been fully explored in terms of like, other types of systems like peer-to-peer systems and things like that. Like maybe we should be making our protocols simpler so that, that they're adopted quicker. I think maybe one reason why people aren't using protocols as much is maybe that they're too complicated, and we need to be thinking about simplicity in terms of driving adoption. So.
Bitcoin has a lot of that, right? Bitcoin is super complicated on the consensus level, right? But in the transaction level, it's surprisingly simple, especially if you're using old pre-HD wallets, right? So pre-BIP32. It was super easy to create a key pair and, construct a transaction and send it out. Same for receiving it. I feel like I really see how like Nostr and Bitcoin overlap in that sense. And I guess like to me, that's why I was drawn to it. I mean, Doc Hex, my business partner, goes and builds a relay from scratch, just following each NIP over the break. It is amazing to be able to do that, without sort of like losing yourself in the complication. Yeah, that was super cool.
Yeah, and like building a relay is actually one of the harder things to do. So.
BitTorrent is also a very simple protocol, and you can see that there is a surprisingly huge amount of BitTorrent clients, even though most people use the same 3 or 4. There are a lot of libraries and clients for BitTorrent, and it's for what it does is also very simple.
The torrent stuff sort of like started to work very well once they added magnets. That was sort of like the original sin was needing a centralized point of coordination, right? That's why Pirate Bay is still to this day trying to hide.
Should we have a Nostr DHT is what you're saying?
No, I don't think the DHT works. The magnets, they generally have a tracker ID, like a tracker
that's
URL,
right.
And that's when it works well. The DHT sometimes works, but in my experience, not very often.
I mean, there is ZeroNet was a project tried to do that. I don't know if any of you guys heard about this project called Twister. It was a guy from Brazil, maybe 2014, that tried to do something similar to Nostr in concept, but it was more complicated and it disappeared. It was a Twitter clone kind of project.
Yeah, I've heard about it, but I've read about it multiple times in my life, but I don't remember anything.
Yeah. It was quite a while. Okay, so why don't we let's start sort of like picking apart and breaking this stuff down, right? I think, I had this aha moment, I think it was a couple weeks ago, because I had my key many months ago, and then I lost that key. And then I sort of like kind of was watching Nostr's Telegram, but I wasn't participating. And then I sort of came back to it. And I finally had my aha moment with Nostr's topology, right? And I think this sort of like really confuses people. So like Nostr is not like a server client model in the way that most people think, right? It's a many to many. You can have your client or your multiple clients, your multiple IDs talking to many different relays. Some of these relays may overlap, so you may have data duplication, which is kind of nice to a certain extent. Data retention is also undefined. And you can also have relays talking to relays, not so much now, but in the future, we will definitely have that. So do you guys want to comment a little bit on the topology of Nostr? Because I think we really need to sort of like explain to people how this works.
I don't think we even agree of how it's supposed to work in practice. I think the clients currently, they connect to a bunch of sometimes fixed set of relays, and they expect to find everything in these. I don't think that's how it's going to work in the future, or how it's supposed to work. But something like that, yeah.
Yeah, this is something me and Fiatjaf were like talking about on the on the GitHub repo, just because we're talking about the repo spec and how it's such a mess right now. and I was like, hey, like, something Damus does, which is really dumb, which is it actually encodes the event into the boost, so that like no matter if my client is not, or if your client is not connected to the relay that where that post came from, it can at least still display it. So it opened up discussion about, how should the Damus client be like opening up random connections to relays and trying to fetch stuff and try to find stuff. It's starting to look a lot more like a peer-to-peer system in that sense, where it's like you're opening up connections all the time to find stuff. But this is not, so I don't know, there's many different ways you can do it. Like right now, Damus just, again, connects to that fixed set of relays. And it really relies a lot on looking at people's profiles and connecting to those relays. And just having your relays on your profile, it's really helpful for clients. So you can see like, oh, maybe I should be connecting to those relays as well. Or if they weren't on your profile, maybe it would be hard to know which relays they're connected to. So yeah, I think we're still kind of figuring it all out because it's kind of confusing. Fiatjaf has one vision. Damus is like kind of doing its own thing, but maybe it'll move slowly toward more Fiat's vision where I'm just connecting to relays, finding stuff. But yeah, I think there's many possible ways to do it.
I think it's really is an amazing property of this protocol that you can make these choices on the go. Like we're not stuck on an early spec of the protocol that sort of like prevents us from changing how this topology works. And at least in my view, I think it's going to be different for different applications of Nostr. Like maybe you have, ultra censorship resistant paste bin application like the NOS bin thing where, you don't need a lot of communication back and forth between the readers and the author. So, maybe you have like many relays versus, applications where you have a lot of back and forth and maybe it's less relays. How we choose to use the client for the purpose will, in my view at least, dictate a lot of this. We actually have a NIP coming that's going to ruffle some feathers.
What nib?
Yeah, no, we have a draft coming for some ideas on relay related stuff because that's still quite empty. Because we built a relay, right, just to test the relays, but I won't get into it. It's not mine. It's gonna be great.
Yeah, I've been wasting a lot of time answering, commenting on NIP proposals, and people proposing stuff. These things are consuming me.
I used to be able to keep up with that stuff, and now I can't even follow the repo anymore. It's just like a new NIP every day. It's insane.
I mean, that's part of the deal, right? Like when you're a project maintainer, things can consume your life. I mean, at least this is not like Bitcoin where, you're immediately dealing with money. So there's a lot less room for mistakes and a lot less room for experimentation. So I think there's like a lot more room for people to play around and sort of like go their own way too.
I think it'll be sad when you like go to the NIPS repo and then you just see like 1,000 NIPS and you're like, then it just looks really complicated. I don't know. I do miss the days when it was like 10 NIPS or so or whatever it was.
Jack, you're funding another couple of, at least that I know, another couple of interesting sort of attempts at creating sort of like decentralized social media. You started one at Twitter, and then like you have decentralized ID stuff. You have a bunch of little projects. We don't have to get into them because I don't want to sort of dive into sort of like comparing them specifically. But I want to understand from somebody who has been in the internet, playing with the internet for as long as you have, what is the goal here? Sort of like the bigger goal for this stuff, right? Like, what were you trying to achieve by funding these projects and also sort of helping fund some of the Nostr work as well?
Yeah. It kind of goes back to what you said earlier about the feeling of the early internet to me. Like I got into this, I was in St. Louis. St. Louis, had the academia military industrial complex there with McDonnell Douglas and Washington University. And we had early access to the internet through BBSs. And I discovered Usenet really early and IRC, and it led me to the Linux source code when it was just starting. And it was just so incredible how it worked and how it failed and how it failed over. The amount of redundancy and just excitement to build for it. And then, in the 90s, as more and more people got onto the internet, like one of the problems that a lot of companies tried to solve was the discovery problem. Like IRC and Usenet and SMTP, email and the web were all inherently fairly decentralized as long as you could host a server and find what you were looking for. Google comes along and Facebook and Twitter and centralizes discovery. But unfortunately, the centralization of discovery also meant centralization of data ownership and monetizing that because they're companies, which led to the ad model and putting almost all the eggs in that one bucket without, doing a proper exploration of other models that could work. And those incentives, of course, then going public and having shareholders created this, a particular direction and a momentum that was very difficult to get out of. That was definitely my experience at Twitter. We built something that was entirely, and still is, entirely dependent upon brand advertising. And you're in a class of companies where you are seen as, this by advertisers, their budget is really seeing you as like a nice to have, but not necessary because you're so small relative to the giants. And that puts a lot of pressure on how you develop, what systems you build, what content is on the network. And to me, it really all came back to the fact that we were both the client and the protocol and the hosting of all of it, which put a single point of failure in terms of how people used it. And the single point of failure was ultimately the company. So in retrospect, when we were just an API and we were a fun little project inside of another company, those were the glory days. That's when anything went. And, we didn't have any external pressures to grow or to monetize. We were just having fun. And it just reminded me of like the only way this can truly be done in a way that serves all the people without all the surface area that centralization provides. One, for advertisers telling you what they want and what they want you to do. The second, for governments telling you what they want and what they want you to do, or what data they want for particular users that they don't like or want more information around. Turkey was a great example of always a government that always wanted information about particular journalists that were critiquing them. There's, hundreds of other examples of that. But when Bitcoin came along, it looked from the white paper that at least some of the discovery issues that we were trying to solve for in a centralized way could be rethought. And it could be done in a way that was actually open, that was actually accessible. Obviously, there's much more accessibility we need to build on top of Bitcoin and through Bitcoin, but at least it showed a different path. And in 2009, when I was starting Square and Bitcoin was coming out, it just really changed the way I thought about everything. It reminded me of the early internet. It reminded me of why I was here and what I loved. And then it was just a matter of, going against this like incredible momentum that a public company incentive provides. So I think, all the lessons that we learned as a company, we now have not the technology, but the understanding as to how to do it a little bit more correct and a little bit more right. And I think you see that, I see it in this protocol. But I also think it's beneficial to try different things. The Web 5 work, the DIDs, I think they're solving identity problems. I think there's some really good solutions that, I'm excited about. I don't expect it to be usable for everything. Blue Sky is focused entirely on the social network use case. And they're doing a different approach than what we experience here, which is, put a spec for a protocol out. It's not necessarily as simple, but there's a lot of thought that went into it. And building a client in a less public way, using that as a reference, and then hoping that that inspires more developer activity. So I think these A/B tests for development models are generally good, and over time, I don't think they're necessarily competitive. The reason we started Blue Sky Twitter is like ultimately we're only as good as the content we have access to. And if we help create a protocol that people actually want to use and put stuff on, and we can get access to that content, we get better, we get stronger because of it. So I don't see Nostr as competitive to Twitter. It would be my hope that it becomes a client, and it would be a great thing strategically because they have access to more content. And if they continue with a ad-based model, that's critical. But even if they explore other models, such as commerce, such as subscription, it's also meaningful that you just have a bigger network. And it's really the presentation layer that Twitter should sit at. It should not own all three of those things, the hosting and also the protocol layer. So this solves for all those things so in such an elegant way. And to me, my heart is more this approach, like super dead simple, make it public right away. I love that Fiatjaf made it public domain. And just, what's the velocity that a developer has from going from reading that document, being able to keep it in their head enough that they can replicate what William did, and in an afternoon actually feel something for themselves to a point where they want to share with someone else so that they can feel the same thing. That to me is the magic path. But I think it's important that we have different models as well.
Well, I mean, different people, different applications, right? There's going to be a lot of stuff out there. Fiat, do you want to comment?
Yeah, I was going to ask him, what do you think about Farcaster, Jack? Because people have been comparing Nostr with Farcaster a lot. Have you looked into that?
I'm not that familiar with it, actually. I've tried to find as much as I can, but I don't know. What really struck me about what you did was first that initial paragraph, and then listing out, the problems to be solved and the comparisons you did at the end of the doc. Like, the scuttlebutt was very interesting, but heavy in implementation. This work took all those learnings, it seems to me, and just took the essence of it and put it out there with the desire of the problems that we encounter in the future will be a matter of iteration, and new ideas. And I just, as I think William said, it's beautiful. I mean, the inception and just how it's evolved over time has been really, in a short amount of time, has been really spectacular to me and to see.
Yeah, I think this is a good point to sort of get into incentives, right? In Bitcoin, the incentive is sort of for you to participate as a good actor so that you don't break somebody else's bags, because if you break their bags, you break your bags, right? So you have this mutual assured destruction. You have this Mexican standoff style of network. Everybody keeps each other's honest, and we all get to sort of participate in that. But because it's money, a lot of people who are interested in that topic come in, and it's a lot easier to monetize, really. I was very surprised how reasonably easy it is to sort of start finding income in Bitcoin as you build Bitcoin things, right? One, because people put more, I guess, value into things, at least in my case, things that make their Bitcoin secure, right? So this is not a nice to have, this is a must have, and they understand the value proposition very fast. And then because some companies are moving money around, they can take a cut, they can, there's many ways to monetize that. You don't have to think about ads or anything like that in Bitcoin. And then you also have the number go up, right? So people who have been in this space for long, held a little bit, so they managed to have their pile be worth a little bit more, and they can self-sustain and work on Bitcoin, open or close or whatever. But people can find a way to find a living to work in Bitcoin. So the incentives are much better. What was very cool to me immediately with Nostr was the fact that there was no token, right? We're in an age of token, which is an absolute disgusting thing. And the incentives, because there's no centralization, there's no toll booth, we could find a way for people to start building things. And these incentives actually go against you trying to sort of force too much onto the user to pay, or it seems at least that way because you can just move somewhere else. At least in my view, you can do, say pay to relay in the future. There's a myriad of ways in which you can find monetization, find better incentives. How do you guys see the incentives around building on Nostr versus, old centralized protocols, or versus Bitcoin, really? Go ahead, GB.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know. It would be curious to see what would happen to this protocol in a world where Bitcoin didn't exist. Because like spam would be a huge issue. And I'm not sure if there's an obvious way to solve that without like some type of like, frictionless monetary system that you can easily tap into and like use for spam prevention and things like that. But honestly, what's been the most mind blowing to me, it's just like even just something simple as adding that lightning tip button to like profiles and just seeing the number of people who are donating, like basically contributing to my development of Damus just for adding that button. And I'm like, I didn't even like integrate that much lightning stuff in. I'm eventually gonna have like listing tips and things like that. But the amount of people who are just contributing, like, streaming sats into my node at home, that was such a profound thing. I don't think I really clicked until there was like a social network around Bitcoin, right? So I think that is going to be insane. Like the network effects of everyone using Lightning within the system. So I think Lightning and Nostr are like very integrally linked, and we're just starting to see that play out at the very early beginnings. But I don't even know where this is going to go.
I don't think Nostr is so deeply tied to Bitcoin like that. I think it could be done like you could do spam prevention with other forms of whitelisting people by maybe requiring them to pass a reCAPTCHA on your website or other forms of registration, phone numbers, etc. And also you could ask them to pay via credit cards and so on. And I don't like very much that it's so tied to Bitcoin, because it's people that don't like Bitcoin, they look at Nostr and say, oh, this is a Bitcoin thing, so I'm not going to touch that. I wanted them to come in without thinking it's a Bitcoin thing, and when they're inside, they start to see Bitcoin stuff in there, so they convert it to Bitcoin. So I think that would be better.
We should have like no Bitcoin relays or something.
You could say I'm a little biased to the Bitcoin thing, but like I personally don't see how Nostr wins without Bitcoin, because you end up just sort of centralizing everything again, and you end up just having KYC everything, because that's how you find payments. I think it is possible that Nostr can exist without Bitcoin, no doubt, but I don't think would be the sort of like permissionless Nostr that like at least like I'd like to see. I think it would be very hard to do anything. I mean, anybody who touched payments as a business or whatever, like can understand that like as soon as you start taking payments, you are now fully capturable, right? And that becomes a problem if you want to build a network where people can sort of exist, interact, express themselves, sell stuff in it, do whatever they want. If, say, relays are reliant on KYC'd payments, right? I mean, like, you wouldn't be able even to accept customers from, some country that are not allowed to do business with your country. It's sort of like the recapturization of everything. I think it's just so cool that like the first interaction you can have with a relay could be a 402, right? You could have a like payment required, and it could be a couple of sats. It could be sats that are, say, for example, subsidized by Damus as a client that's charging a person a fee per month to have the Damus premium or whatever. So that customer per se that just came from the App Store, that knows nothing about Bitcoin, knows nothing about Lightning, can still be paying indirectly for subsidizing the relays that are sort of taking the pounding from a Damus sort of like data stream. Yeah, I find it's just super important to understand that like, we need money. Without money, you can't build the coolest things. I mean, you can start the coolest things, but it's very hard to scale the coolest things without like real capital, because there's physical costs, right? Like servers or time, devs and everything. So like I saw that very organic growth in being Bitcoin for this long, like, just like this sort of spontaneous order happen in Bitcoin on like how people self-organize to sort of like monetize things and pay for development, and, so people can have an income. Anyways, I found that pretty cool.
I would say that like if Bitcoin existed when we started Twitter, we would not have to go down the ad model path. I mean, it's simple as that. So like to me, what it did for the internet, not society, but what it did for the internet is it just showed another way, and it showed another path that is not, subsidized by an ad model. And not that, that there are ad models that can work. I think the classified ad model at a more localized scale is brilliant. And I think Bitcoin is going to enable that even more. But the fact that this protocol and the clients that build on top of it have multiple options and multiple choices, and it creates more of a market-based, winner approach instead of, having to compete with the giants in a way that they are firmly entrenched in both regulation and also, of course, usage is really, really important. So I think, that tangibility I was speaking about earlier, where in early Twitter days, like when we're more SMS based, you could feel a tweet in your pocket because your phone would buzz. To me, that's what that's effectively what, paying Lightning invoices on this protocol feels like right now. It just like you do it, or you put an invoice out there and suddenly you get a notification that someone paid it, and it just feels amazing. It feels alive. It feels tangible. And when people can feel the thing, it just lights up the imagination. When it's all abstraction, which unfortunately is, to me, the case with what we see with Mastodon and Matrix and a bunch of other things, the marketing to people is quote unquote decentralized, and it's not about necessarily the utility and the use case. And being able to say, like, you can instantly see how this global money transmission protocol really works and really feels with strangers is pretty incredible. And I think it just gets people thinking in a different way. And it's probably not the end all be all, but the number of models and the new incentives that can be created because this exists, because Bitcoin exists, and we can pair it with Nostr, I think is the most important thing.
The Lightning thing never clicked for me that much because, I'm a base layer boomer until I started doing this podcast thing with the podcast 2.0, where I'm seeing sats being streamed to us. I mean, it is super cool. You get that very special connection with somebody who's a listener, because they didn't just sort of like go on, like your YouTube channel or whatever and sort of like put a comment, right? They're streaming sats and they're like sending what they call boostergrams, right? So you're getting these messages with like a financial token, right? I know like tips are kind of ridiculous when you think about it economically speaking, but they're not empty like a like, right? A like is truly empty. And when somebody parts away with their sats, like there is a special connection there. And I'm seeing this, like everybody posting these Lightning invoices, like since when demos started to take off. It's just so cool, right? I mean, like people are paying each other, buying each other coffees and things. Like it really has a different feel to it than just sort of like people yapping around about how cool the protocol is, right?
Hey, a shaka is not empty, all right?
That's right. It really is that feel, like the shack is not empty. So why don't we go around a few times here and we talk about just like possible use cases? At least to me, like a good way I find to explore new things I don't understand is try to sort of like think of all the crazy business ideas I could have for it and sort of like try to fit that new technology or new tool into like a whole slew of like different boxes and see sort of like if it works, right? And that sort of creates for me a nice mental model of like all the possibilities and sort of like the aspects of the technology. We talked about how like, Nostr is great for social media, right? Like it is a fantastic Twitter replacement. I mean, you guys managed to even bring over the inventor of Twitter here. So that one is settled. So like, for example, at least in my view, like you have like broadcast is the like one of the main aspects properties of this protocol, right? Like it's a broadcast system in a way, but it's a two-way broadcast system. So like you can have like marketplaces where you can post, a note that has something for sale, and then people can respond to it. People can DM you. People can maybe bid for it. I'd love to see a NIP for bids. Hopefully that's not a client thing. It's sort of like a protocol thing. Maybe it's stupid. You could have the paste bin thing that we talked about with the Nostr bin project, where you can post a paste bin, and that's fairly censorship resistant. Nobody's going to take that bin down. What do you guys think? Do you guys want to give some awesome examples of things you can see exist in this protocol?
So I've been doing a lot of posts on Nostr about potential ideas in the future. The stuff I want to build, at least in Damus or maybe even other clients. The commerce thing is huge, because the minute we have lightning tipping, where you can list the tips, people who are buying things within the app, and then you can start to open up really interesting direct to consumer use cases where you can, if you're a clothing store, you can sell stuff right in a post, and you get instant feedback. And when you you imagine buying something, someone just randomly buying something, and now it shows up on the post, and then they get a badge and things like that. So there's a lot of really cool direct to consumer stuff, but that's just maybe within the commerce. But in terms of more at the protocol level, I still think, and no one's actually doing this as far as I know, but we have this system where we can connect to multiple relays, but there's no reason why you couldn't connect to just one relay, which is just your company relay that just manages communication. And so you don't need the relay pool in that instance, but you get to utilize all these other clients and tools to interact with your company Slack or something, right? So you can totally imagine a Slack for your own company that's just built on Nostr, and you only connect to one relay. So I think there's so many use cases like that we haven't even really looked at yet.
JB, I was thinking the other day, once there is some crazy amount of traffic coming in, clients may not be able to filter anymore, right? The global feed that you're connected to. So I was thinking, it's very likely you could see people running a buffer relay or something like that, where they control, or a client that they really like controls for them, where they can do some pretty insane advanced filters and sort of send to their client a much more sort of contained collection of filters for them to sort of watch.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know. I'm very wary of really filtering, just because I always want that to be I mean, that's just me personally, but I would always want that to be a client choice and a user choice. I get very uncomfortable when relays are making those decisions for me, but that's just me personally.
No, I think I like the idea of relays filtering. Yeah. The way I see it, yeah, this is just the social stuff. I see it you connecting to a bunch of relays full of spam, open, and so on to talk to random people, different people. But for your global feed, or for the type of stuff you show in the replies to your posts that could be spam, you only accept stuff from relays that are filtered, or that they have some way of preventing spam on their side. But yeah, other ideas, I've had a lot of ideas. I don't know, probably most of them are trash, but I always think of having specific clients that only use dedicated to these niche use case. Yeah.
Yes.
But
we're gonna need that.
Yeah, but when I see for the commerce stuff, I've been meaning to write. I've been meaning to write to a commerce client in a way to have a store and publish stuff there, but I couldn't manage to do anything yet. But then when I saw JB's idea of selling stuff on a post, I think that maybe it's a simpler way, it's a easier way, and that a way that will catch on better if you have stuff mixed in with the social layer, the social clients.
What if we had a kind? I mean, maybe this is just dumb because you don't want to add this to the protocol level, but it would be nice if the notes themselves had some description of the intention, because I don't want to see NVK's good morning post coming into my classifieds feed, right? Even though I may be sharing some relays that are relaying those kinds of informations, right? So maybe
that's why you have the kind stuff, right? The numbers, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
We could be much better at this. For instance, whenever you see an invoice get pasted into a note, and maybe you don't actually create a kind one note, but you create a kind 9735 note or something, and it maybe other clients, because right now a lot of people complain that there's too much invoice spam in the client. So yes. if it just created a different kind, you can just filter out all the invoices from your feed automatically, which would be kind of cool.
Can we create a kind 402? So if you send that, just means you have to send payment, and that one maybe is a lightning invoice in it.
Maybe.
I don't see how that works.
You'd have to be fully baked. This is not fully baked. Okay, so like, what other, Jack? Do you have like some cool ideas you want to see existing on this? Like, even if it's like stupid now, and we're gonna find it that like it's completely impossible.
It feels like we're going to be in a phase for a little bit of time. We're replicating what already exists, like the Slack clients, the Reddit, Twitter, obviously, and there's more running away from a thing to this instead of running to it for a particular new use case. And to me, the new use cases always come from mashups of different things. So it might be the fact that, just a simple example, it might be the fact that like commerce and money transmission becomes so native to social. That might be the utility that really takes this to the next level and gets it broad adoption. But I think for a little while, we'll see a bunch of projects that are just, replicating what exists. And it's something I want. I hate Slack. Like, there's a number of issues that it presents, but the use case is still important. And to be able to see that on this protocol, and then to see how all these things interact with one another, that to me is where like the truly unique utilities is ultimately going to come from. And it's probably not going to be necessarily designed proactively. It'll be discovered, and something that like someone just trips upon and decides to like go down the rabbit hole and build. So to answer your question, I don't know. Like all that's in my mind right now are just things that we might replicate in a better way, but that's not going to be that's not going to be the reason that people actually come to this protocol and to the respective clients. There's going to be some new utility, some new use case that is so undeniable that I have to run to it, and I have to be a part of it. And that, in addition to the network effects and probably the utility effect, I think what's interesting about this protocol is it's not just focused on social media. It at least sets the stage for an ecosystem of different use cases working together. And to me, that's going to be the power, is that, you have one understanding of how to interact with this. It's a very, very simple one. And with that one simple understanding, the, public-private key pair, you have this entirely new universe of things that suddenly work together. And I just don't think we've experienced that as much before. So like if there were one use case, it would be, this kind of ecosystem mentality of like, these things just work. And I didn't really have to do much at all. I can forget everything I know about like the old password model and really get a ton of utility in my own way, my own choices, just by generating a key pair once, the whole new universe. And I can have multiple identities, multiple key pairs for different things, and potentially in the future intermix them. But to me, like, that's the power of it, is like, just this, like, it's a new universe. It's not one thing.
Yeah, I mean, like when you think about it, like most new technology happens that way, right? Like in the beginning of Bitcoin, everybody was trying to recreate casinos and try to make payments, right? Because that's what we know. And then 10 years later, people are creating ways for you to fund podcasts with, Lightning and, streaming money. Streaming money was completely impossible before Bitcoin. So it is fascinating how we do recreate things and sort of experiment by trying to remake what we know.
Yep. But I think one point Jack said is important, is the general interoperability between different use cases. Like you could have a e-commerce use case or a Wikipedia use case, but you could somehow tie that to the social stuff. For example, you could just grab the most dumb way to be to put comments on everything, but but the other things can happen.
Exactly.
No, for sure. I mean, like, yeah, that's the thing that is so cool, right? It's, Bitcoin, you have this common money, right? This common value, but like money is kind of pointless if you don't have like communication, right? Like two people need to communicate in order to trade. And like what you invented here, Fiat, like is, in my view at least, like you now have a common carrier for that coordination and communication. Like these things are so intertwined and so important, and they're the fabric of everything a society does. Like it's like talk to each other and figure out how to trade, right? Anyways, it's just super cool.
Well, I just want to say, like, I don't know if I would actually be interested in building Damus if it didn't have something new to offer, right? So that's where like the Lightning part is very important to Damus. Like, we like say, oh, we don't want to push people away but I just don't think Damus would be that interesting if it was just another Twitter clone, right? So I just feel like integrating Lightning into a social network is the killer app, I think, for at least on the Damus side. Otherwise, it's just it's just a shittier version of Twitter. Like I guess like.
I'm not trying to say you shouldn't have Lightning stuff on demos. That I don't know what I was trying to say, but that was not it.
I mean, I think your sentiment is correct as somebody who invented the thing. I mean, like, you don't want to pigeonhole the thing into Bitcoin, but this is a Bitcoiner's job to do. We're going to keep on pigeonholing, Nostr into Bitcoin far in the future. But like, I totally understand. I mean, like, you created a thing that's like, it's independent of Bitcoin. Like, am I getting this wrong?
Yeah, I think it's that you're trying to say. Yeah. Well, I want Bitcoin to succeed much more than what Nostr should succeed. So I would sacrifice Nostr tomorrow if you could get Bitcoin global adoption.
I mean, that's very kind of you, but because your invention is sort of independent of you in the way you create it, it is that special. We can say, okay, bye, Fiat. We're going to continue on in this Nostr thing. It's very similar. Like Satoshi got pushed out. Most people think that Satoshi is like just sort of like, like Jesus type character, which I think is important on how the religion of Bitcoin is disseminated. This is a different sort of conversation, but I think the true testament to an incredible new invention is the fact that like anybody who participates in his invention can be completely sort of pushed aside and the invention continues on its own. I mean, what he did is beautiful that way.
Okay, I'll leave.
So guys, I mean, I'm good either way, but like, do you guys want to sort of like maybe give a few more ideas? Because one thing I've noticed, like being in technology for this long, is that like a lot of people, they may be great builders, they may be great business starters, they may be like, but people oftentimes don't have like broad imagination about like a new technology. So like, I'd love to seed like people's imaginations if we can with like ideas, even if they're not baked concepts, but like things that like would be really cool that you wish existed in Nostr today. So like we don't have to like work it through, but just like like you guys were mentioning like the commerce stuff, like for example, PubNub is an incredible service, right? Like, and it's push notification essentially. Like in my view, it could be completely replaced by Nostr, right? Like boom, you just have a whole sort of like SaaS industry that you can disrupt with like having this system available to projects that don't have a very specific thing that they need from PubNub, but they were just trying to push. So like in my view, like you can now have like 10,000 concurrent users on a chat room being pushed stuff from each other without needing the centralized entity to make it happen. Is there other like very obvious things to you that come to mind?
At least what I've been thinking is, what other things could we be integrating into Nostr? So for instance, like, does it make sense for Nostr clients to have more peer-to-peer functionality so that you can, like, let's say, spin up a video chat? Like, so not necessarily building on Nostr directly, but, what are other things we can integrate to, like, improve the experience? And how can other protocols, like, improve the Nostr experience? So that's one thing I've been thinking about. Another thing is, how can we apply the Nostr model to other protocols? So for instance, Nostr is mainly for text, and a lot of the confusion I see of people joining on the network is like, oh, how do I post an image to Nostr, or how do I upload my cat photos, or upload my 6 GB file to Nostr? I'm like, well, no, this is not what this is for. But would it make sense to like look at the Nostr model and apply it to like maybe a binary protocol, but using a similar topology? That's an interesting idea that it would be cool to people to explore. Like this idea that we need to put everything on Nostr might be misguided. So I don't know, this is some things I'm thinking about.
Yeah, I agree with that. We shouldn't put everything on Nostr.
So no base 64 inline.
Well, people are doing that. I wish relays prevented people from doing that so they could give up. A guy made a file system over Nostr, something like that.
Yeah, like before, this is pre-Bitcoin, we built a dispatch software for a very, very big taxi company, one of the biggest ones in the world. And like being able to do that push notification and push the order into all this clients, and I mean, like, I can see all this industries like being completely replaced like tomorrow, like, because this protocol is so simple, so usable, like it is literally a weak project for somebody to replace some of these like industries that were built around push. I guess I'm just very stuck on that. I want to see pagers come back.
The problem with push stuff is that you have to keep a connection open. I don't know how Android and
No, you
iPhone...
can push once. No, you can push once, and you can have a client do some pooling just to remain alive, right? And then you can have the client do that pull. Like, it's going to look like a push, but it's actually a client doing a pull. It's just that was not very possible before Nostr to do in any sort of reasonable, scalable way.
The big class of use case that selfishly I'm interested in, that I think this protocol will eventually help address is, Block bought a title like just over a year ago, and streaming, has a bunch of issues that need to be rethought. But the specific use case that I'm thinking deeply about in intersection with this protocol is just like the musician side, and specifically there's the obvious ones around payment for artists. Like the current system is just criminal in the way the artists get paid and the way that they enter into contracts and how their life's work is taken from them without any sort of financial education to put them in a better position. But the collaboration side for artists, especially new artists, is just wild. And it's a complete gap in the world. Like, there are very little tools. There's so many artists that collaborate over iMessage, and a lot of them over TikTok or Instagram DM. And that problem itself, I think, has a lot of intersection with what this protocol enables, because you do have this fluidness between a social layer and a money transmission layer, and eventually a commerce layer. And for a new artist to really get established, they need to have some sort of confidence that they'll be able to be paid for their work, and they can leave whatever job that they're currently in because they can see the horizon of not only getting listeners, but actually those listeners exchanging value for their value. So this concept of exchange of value for musicians and how musicians work together, and you can go more broad into artists, obviously, but music is such a fundamental part of life, and it's been so long that it's really been critically looked at and changed and evolved. And I think a lot of it obviously has to do with the concentration of the labels, but there are just no options for the musicians right now. There's no new thinking. And if this protocol does nothing else, in concert with Bitcoin, it makes people think a different way. And it just opens the door to many more possibilities. Some of them will work, some of them won't, but it at least presents a challenge to the status quo. And it's so needed because it is so locked in at the moment.
With the podcast 2.0 thing, right? We finally see a way to do this. So you have the streaming, and then you can do the sats, like the splits. That's what they call it. The cool kids call it the splits. And then you can have the sats coming into your pod, and you can actually, I'm not set up for this, but you can actually do per episode splits, right? With other guests that are there, that are set up for it. There is no reason why like music couldn't work that way, right? So like the same way like movies exactly. And labels, like you have the people who worked on a record, right? I mean, you could have the artist set up the splits right from there, and then people just get paid as things sort of get consumed. But then you have the issue, right? And this is the issue that I've always had with RSS. RSS needs to be semi-centralized, right? There is no good way of doing truly distributed RSS. And Nostr comes in and it's like, hey, holy crap, you could do this podcast 2.0 thing, the value for value thing, but instead of using RSS, you could actually do the distribution with a Nostr protocol and be like unkillable, right? Like it's like completely censorship resistant if you have this in enough nodes or relays. And this could be distributed in any kinds of platforms. And you immediately have the social layer on top where people can comment, participate. I don't know. It's just so crazy cool.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
sorry, William, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, like, on the label side, because I worked at a record label here in Canada called Monstercat, and I honestly think the biggest issues that we're just running into is the fact that everything was so siloed. So just all the contracts, each label, all the splits. I mean, it makes sense a lot of the time that they're hidden because there's like ghost producers and things like that. But the minute you have a system where potentially you could open it up, it just kind of opens up a lot of proprietary stacks. And that's particularly important when you're trying to do attribution for like stems and things like that, where you want to be able to pay these people, but a lot of the time you just can't track down the splits properly. So just that was the biggest issue that that I saw at Monstercat was just how do you have an open system like where you can, and not only that, because it's a little bit different from RSS, because RSS is just kind of like an XML document and it's kind of you got to sift through it and build specialized tools to kind of like.
At least it's not soap.
Yeah, but like just the ability to query stuff. Like I want to be able to say, hey, give me all of the splits for this artist, right? Who to associate with a pub key. Like being able to do that with a simple query model that's like universal, and then you can attach comments to it. I don't know. I feel like that itself is just that queryability aspect is super important for these types of use cases, and it's not something you can simply replace by like an RSS feed, right?
I mean, you're going to be able to do that with software, right? Like that's how you could fund software. Like, I mean, you can have you could do Git over Nostr, really. I mean, you can choose if you want to push the actual commits through Nostr or not, because it's just text. It could get pretty crazy in size. But like you could at least do the meta part of Git, with Nostr. You could have comments, you could have payments, right? So people using the software now could actually like donate to the exact person who made the commit, and in scale. This is like the absolute crazy part to me, is that you can do all these cool things that are completely like pie in the sky dreams, right? That we've been hearing the Web3 people sort of like masturbate about for the last 5 years with tokens and crap. But that's all possible now for real, like in scale.
Yeah, the GitHub use case I think would be incredible stuff, like being able to get Bitcoin Core off GitHub, and then obviously all these projects on Nostr off GitHub would be amazing. But when you actually get into like thinking about how to fund free software and open source, again, this presents like just a new idea and a new model, and there's a lot of parallels to what William was saying in the music industry. But really, you're giving this new utility to creators worldwide, whether they create source code or music or stems or jingles or whatever it is. It ultimately comes back to how do I fund my life such that I don't have to take another job that distracts away from what I truly want to do. And the what Fiatjaf said earlier about the interoperability of all these things within the ecosystem and the use cases, that it's a super, super powerful idea that I think we've just seen a glimmer of with the Lightning integration. But it's, the other aha moment I had was being able to move from client to client so effortlessly, and imagining being able to move from use case to use case with that same lack of effort and the lack of friction that we've already seen, and moving from one client to another. That's magic to me. Like you don't have that anywhere else on the internet right now.
I was going to bring that up. I mean, one of the most amazing things in Bitcoin is the fact that, through that key pair system, you're not tied to any wallet, right? I mean, the client. So like you just go to something else and your money just magically shows up there. Like, I mean, it's crazy. Try to change banks, right? Like it doesn't work like that. So now you have that for the information comms layer, right? Like, social is part of that. Like it's just, you can move communication type and layer with just that public key pair. That's fascinating.
So the thing that underlies all these things is this idea of like a language for computers. Like that's how I view protocols. Imagine, and it's a simple language, right? So imagine if it was a language that you could easily pick up and learn. And it's almost like algebra, right? There's simple rules, you can put them together. And then once everyone knows the rules, then you can build some insanely powerful things just from like these simple constructions. So that's kind of how I view, like, whether it's Bitcoin or whether it's, any protocol or even Nostr, just that the fact that we all have a common language now to like build together, you can build independently, but still interoperate because we have that common computer language. So I don't know, that's the way I kind of see it.
Yeah, I mean the common bus is important, right? I mean, you can't build electrical things without a bus. It's the same for money now with Bitcoin. It's the same for comms now with Nostr. Like, I mean, and those are the building blocks of civilization, right? Those are the building blocks of like human interactions. Like you need these things.
Yeah, so in some sense, centralization of these services is like, it's like corrupting the language itself. Like if we're thinking of protocols as like a language for computers, and then you take that ability away from computers and individuals to like communicate, and they control the language. It's very much like, I don't know, Big Brother in that sense, but at the protocol level. It's an interesting way to look at it from that perspective.
I mean, it's hard. It's a very hard problem, right? To make things distributed, like, and still have a common language, right? I mean, Bitcoin, in my view, was the first thing that ever achieved that, like, properly, right? And, centralized systems, centralized protocols, centralized services are extremely efficient. That is the gain. It's like, it's an undeniable gain that you have, is that efficiency. That's why people use Visa, right? I mean, it is fantastic. I mean, 99% of the time it works. You go to the place, you tap your card, boom, it's done, right? And until like this kind of technology came about and these aha moments and this sort of like inventions come around, it's very hard to sort of like just try to attack those problems. We had the Byzantine general problem resolved. And now I think the way the Fiat designed Nostr, like, we have decentralized, distributed, really, comms resolved. Yeah. So what do you guys see? Like, I mean, I guess we can get into the weeds a little bit of like some of the criticisms of Nostr and like some of the things that are unresolved, right? I think because of the nature of how this thing has been developed, unresolved things can be resolved later. But some things are, in my view at least, like super necessary in order for people to take this very seriously with their true value, right? Like, they don't want to lose their identity. They don't want to lose their money, that kind of problem, right? So for example, key rotation and delegation, right? I love the key pair solution. And I think there is a BIP, right? A NIP for a NIP 26. Jeff, do you want to just talk a little bit about the current state of key delegation, key rotation, and possibly key revocation?
Jesus Christ. So I at first I didn't give too much attention to these things. I don't think it's very important. I don't know if it's that serious as a problem. And I also don't think NIP 26 solves it in the perfect way. And I don't know if people should be expecting NIP 26 to generate a bunch of NIP 26 keys and put one in each app and don't care anymore if these keys are lost or not. And because it's optional, I think clients should be okay to not support it and not show the linkage between two keys that are using the delegation stuff. I think for the main app that you use for your social stuff or whatever else, you should use your actual key. But I don't know if this will work. I think that there are solutions that could be done with multi-sig and dedicated devices that are safer, that just perform signatures. I think if you're a normal person that don't have a lot of online identity reputation, it's okay to lose your identity sometimes. It happens to normal people all the time. Like, they forget the passwords, they change their phones so they don't get to recover their account, so they create a new account. So, but for people that have an image, a reputation, and an online identity that is valuable, that's not a good thing to lose it. So, for these people, maybe more precautions should be taken.
I personally think that delegation is probably be a lot more popular in the future. It does solve a lot of annoying things, such as you don't want to put your private key into a browser, or you don't want to put it into like some random application. Like, so one really good use case is, let's say a Twitter to Nostr cross poster. So you want that app to be able to post on your behalf. So like those are really cool use cases where you can just give it assign a delegation and let that app create those events for you for like the next week or so. And I'm not sure multisig really solves. I think multisig is really interesting for like corporate accounts where you want like make sure that two people sign off on a post, but it's going to be really hard to make it work with if you're creating for each post you have to like do some type of multi-sig thing. I don't know, not really sure how that's going to work unless it's like two software keys or something. I don't know, but I think delegation solves a lot of problems, and I expect more clients to adopt it, I think.
I mean, I'm a little biased on this thing. Just I guess like I've been making Bitcoin security products for so long, and I see how people lose money and how people get screwed losing their keys. I think identity and vanity, the healthy sort of type of vanity, let's call it that, is integral to people's sort of like a view of themselves in how they interact with the world. That's like why it's one of the issues that I'm like super, super keen on seeing resolved. Not a cryptographer. I just hope somebody smart out there comes up with a wonderful solution. We've seen this come and go in Bitcoin a lot. In the early days, you had single key pairs. This is a pre-derivable keys. And that resolved a lot of privacy issues. That resolved a lot of security issues. And then we saw B2SH, which was the first multi-sig thing, and then SegWit. I think the evolution of cryptographic sort of ways of doing things like really help with this kind of stuff. Maybe the bar seems lower right now, but I think as this thing progresses and people have more of their life's work and their sort of income and everything else, it would become critical for people. But these are all resolvable problems, right? I mean, like all you need is people to just sort of like sit there and figure it out. Like it's not things that we cannot resolve. That's the cool part.
Do you think? I don't know. I think these key stuff problems, they are very, very hard to solve. I think I didn't want to trash NIP26. I liked NIP26, and the example JB gave, I think is a good example of how it could be used. I just don't like the idea of people having a hidden key they never show, they never use, and that's their actual key, and then they use other keys for everything. So I think that sounds weird. I don't have an actual reason.
The other keys are always linked to the root key, though, right?
I'm curious why would you not like people to have a hidden parent key? Let's call it that.
I don't know. I don't have a good reason. I just think it feels wrong.
That's fair. I mean, no, it's fair. I mean, it's just your intuition. I don't like it.
I'll come up with a reason.
There you go. Yeah, I think there's going to be many ways of skinning this cat. I was asking you the other day, why did you choose Taproot Schnorr, right, instead of using ECDSA? You just thought it was...
it was more because of the multi-sig stuff. I thought, this is basically the same as the other, but this can do a little more things like the multi-sig stuff. So why not?
No, exactly, right? I mean, like, you have a very decent primitive there with Schnorr. I mean, like, once Moosig gets finalized and all that stuff, I mean, you're going to be able to do a lot. And you can de-risk clients, you can have cosigners, you can do all kinds of crap. Like, maybe people have a personal server on the internet or server or like a key service out there that cosigns things, right? So that they're not at risk as much. I don't know. I really don't know. I just think it's an issue. Go ahead.
Just saying that I think there's a NIP for you. Just what you just described, like a remote signer. I think someone's working on that.
There you go. I mean, I was sending the NIP26 to Gibson, to Adam Gibson, who did a lot of the work on joint markets, and like he's an actual cryptographer. He's like, this is nerd sniping, because like, this is total catnip for cryptographers. So like, I feel like the interest is gonna come, and like a lot of people who know these problems very, very intimately can resolve them.
I was blown away by the like number of people. Like, I didn't know there were so many. I mean, I'm sure they exist existed, but like the fact that the Bitcoin congregated all the best like crypto people in like one spot. Like I didn't know that there were so many good people in this space, and I hope that maybe some of them come over to Nostr and help us out, because like I don't think there's a lot of good like crypto people, because they're like all kind of working on, you know, Bitcoin and things like that, because it's obviously more important for their types of skills. But we definitely need some help like making better encryption specs and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it is quite fascinating, right? I mean, like, there's a lot of stuff that didn't exist before Bitcoin, even though the crypto primitives were around. Like, for example, deterministic builds for software. This is a Bitcoin people invention, right? Because the threshold of security needs that happen with Bitcoin is much greater, right? Because there's no mulligan with Bitcoin. I mean, if you screw up, like, you can't roll back. So I think because Nostr is attractive to so many Bitcoiners, I think you're going to bring those people in.
I also think that I do think the delegation point is really important, because it at least gives you confidence that you can play around with different parts of this emerging ecosystem. But there's something refreshing in this time of not being so tied to an identity. And to me, that was refreshing in first experiencing the multitude of clients and being able to generate new keys and choose whether to persist them or not. Like there's definitely a gap there that I think at least there'll be some interesting use cases that emerge from how fluid the system enables someone to be that we haven't had access to before, because the quote unquote account creation process was so heavy. And obviously Bitcoin contributed a lot to this idea on this path, but to now go to other utilities and have that same sort of approach is, to me, like super refreshing. And I think we'll see a lot of people playing around with that. And you know, one of the things that makes the global feed so magical right now is you can see something. It's all serendipity, but you can see something and you have no idea who this person or bot is, but that one post might be meaningful in a really tangible way. And it just really, you know, detaches the idea of this built-up identity to something a lot more atomic and a lot more free and a lot more fluid. So I just think that's something we don't want to lose, because it's not present anywhere else in my experience.
You know, because this thing is completely distributed, you know, you could have like, you know, the super interesting relays that are serving, you know, more unorganized, more undefined content, right? You could have place where people are sort of like being a little bit more free, and then you're going to end up having your private relays where people are being super formal, right? Like a company relay. There's a lot of companies out there that are going to probably not want to have their Nostr communication right publicly, so they might just have private relays between whoever works at the company. But it's immediately compatible with the broader external communication too. So I don't know, like it gives me hope that it's never going to go away. Like you're always going to have Nostr after dark, you know what I mean? Because that's kind of the vibe you have now. It's like you're in a BBS, you know, and everybody's sort of like sharing stuff and you have no idea who they are, where they are. I don't know. It could still be there forever.
I think the analogy with other aspects of like what we see in the real world in terms of, okay, let's say there's a public space, right? And this might be just like your park near your house, and anyone can go there and scream crazy stuff into the void, and maybe, you know, I don't have to go there. And so the analogy there is, oh, I don't have to connect to that relay, but maybe there's a more semi-private, maybe like a toll like mall or something where you can go and have more civilized discussions without people like screaming. So I'm really interested to see like the breakdown between like public relays, like semi-private relays, private relays, and having clients being able to quickly switch between different views of that. Because some people don't want the Wild West, people screaming in your face, and being able to switch to like a more private view and more like civilized discussion with your friends or with like people who are like maybe paid some money to get in there, you know. I don't know, there's a lot of different like relay models that I think that yet to be explored.
I'm waiting for the relay that bans people that write GM.
I don't know who does that.
I'm surprised it's not a kind yet.
Yeah, very awful people.
So I think like the same way I can see how like, there is a whole new business industry there for people who write AI prompts to generate pictures. You're going to have a huge, like, interesting, both free and paid set of like package filters, right? That may including like which relays you connect to. It could be an art.
Is this the nip you're working on? Is this the controversial thing you're talking about?
No. We're so like the way we experiment with technologies as a company is like we go and we build a thing from scratch. So like with Bitcoin, we built a Bitcoin Explorer back in the day. It was btclook.com. And we sort of understood how Bitcoin worked, right, by building an Explorer. So like right now in Nostr, we're building this because I had an idea for what I wanted to build in Nostr. I think now it's semi-stupid because we sort of work through building something with Nostr. So like there's a few ideas we want to play around with, but we wanted to have a better understanding of this. I don't want to bring too many of my biases into it as we're building it. So yeah, right now we're doing search.
Yeah, that sounds a lot like my implementations on Damus. They're all pretty semi-stupid.
It's easy to be stupid with new technology, right? I mean, it's like, just electricity comes around and people sort of like, oh, okay, so like maybe I could put a lamp in my horse buggy or whatever instead of like trying to make an electric motor, right?
I think Fiatjaf's, I don't know if this was in your document, your Google document after the funding, or if it was in the original spec, but this idea of micro apps and more micro apps being built really removes the barrier for development and puts a lot more emphasis on how these things work together and like truly create this ecosystem. And the cost of doing a micro app is super, super low, but the combination of hundreds of micro apps working together has a high amount of value. And I don't know if the community is necessarily thinking about it that way just yet, because I think we're running away from things and replicating them. But when that clicks, and when we actually see people switching from use case to use case in this like, simple, self-contained, like easy approach of this micro app universe, like that's when I think things get really, really interesting. And when you see more of the quote unquote mainstream adoption, is because that to me is the gap in the market that hasn't been truly filled, especially when you own your data and you own and control your identity and how you participate or how much you participate. So that's what I'm most excited about.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to scale work. Like, because one guy can do a lot of stuff, but it can't do a big, powerful, clean, pretty performant client that does everything like on its own. But one guy can do a client that does one specific thing very well and doesn't do any of the other things. I think that's a very good way to distribute the work.
I think that was the Achilles heel of the browser. The browser is, in my view, one of the biggest sins that ever happened in the internet. It's like you have this thing with millions and millions of lines of local executed code. And like, why? Like, I mean, why can't you have like this plethora of different clients that do different things completely differently based on a single sort of like unifying protocol? I think, that's why we don't see a lot of browser competition. It's impossible to compete with like how the bloat of HTML5 sort of happened. It's very cool. You can do all kinds of cool stuff, but like, it just further centralized things due to complexity.
Yeah. Just going really quick back to like this idea of micro apps, a lot of people, it doesn't really have to even be a client per se. One example of this would be just an embed in your browser. So one example that I really want to build is like those customer chat bots that just pop up. So it could be just a small piece of JavaScript that you put on any web page. And then now you have a customer chat bot that you can link to your relay, that you can have one-to-one conversations on your website. So like those types of, there's micro clients and things like that, but there could be like micro embeds that we can start putting into websites. So I don't know. I don't know if people are thinking it that way as well.
It's super simple. I mean, to build, like if you're building a very restrained client, right, to receive notes and to send notes, it is like trivial. So like, yeah, I mean, there's no reason why all this stuff can't exist. I mean, chatbots are awesome.
Yeah, an embeddable thing like that is a client technically. That's what I was trying to say. Yeah.
You know, like, I love the idea of like DM bots, right? Like we built one that's not doing all the things they need to do. It's the operator at BR018. Why do you need to build UIs on the web for everything? And sort of like, why do you need like passwords to log in, all this stuff? Like, so if we're focusing on like experimenting with different relay things, I want to have, when you join our relay, maybe the paid version of our relay, you get a DM, and the DM's, you know, hi, welcome to, you know, BRB.io. Please pay this Lightning invoice to continue, right? Like, you don't need any other kind of UI. And this is fully private too, because you have an encrypted DM. Like, it's just the possibilities of this prompts, right, to do very complex interactions is very interesting.
I love integrating Nostr into like my desktop. Like one of my hobbies is I just kind of built my own like operating system, like desktop environment. So being able to like, you know, just write some code that listens to events that people are sending me notes, and just having a little glib notify pop up. Like I have a little script that does that. So that's kind of cool. And just being able to, let's say your server is generating events, and like, so now you can just use your Nostr relay as like an event stream. You know, other examples of like, you know, every time my Bitcoin node gets a transaction, I send an event to my private relay, which I get onto my. So just tight integrations into every computer system is something. I don't know if a lot of people are doing that, but I think that's also really kind of fun and cool use case, just to, you know, automate a lot of like stuff that people would normally use like a service for. So
I think that used to be a thing when protocols were simpler and computers were simpler, but like the bloat of HTML5 and everything really modern web is so big that like it became impossible to build little things, right? That just sort of like truly participate as a first-class citizen in the network. And I think like Nostr brings that back. You can really create small things that have an outsized impact in the network.
Yeah, I don't know if we're going there, but like, you know, I definitely agree with the fact that the web has become way too insane and bloated. You know, there's been talks of having a web phone and things like that, but honestly think the web is just way too convoluted to build anything like stable or on top of it. So, you know, I got into programming to do like game development, and I really like that model where you're just doing raw like rendering calls to your GPU, and then, so I don't know, maybe that's the model where we switch away from like the web stack altogether and just use, you know, you're just drawing stuff directly to your GPU. But that was my other client I was working on, trying to demo that, but maybe one day I'll get back to it.
I had this amazing idea for a protocol that went nowhere before Nostr. That was another way, because the nice thing about the web is that you had the URL that you connect directly to a server, and you could do chatbots on Telegram and stuff, but you're still using a centralized provider. But if you could connect directly to a server and have an experience with that server that is common to that talks, like it's a protocol that your client talks to that server with it. And yeah, I was trying to make something like that. It was kind of a mix of a chatbot and other UI components that was drastically simpler than the HTML5 stuff. And I think that why not have a different view? Yeah, I don't know how to explain, but you get it. Yeah, go on.
I was trying to do this with like I have like this metaverse protocol that I was working on, that instead of maybe connecting to a server to get a page, you'd connect to a server and get like a virtual space. And so there's so many things you could do that are cool like that. Like, you know, we're really focused on text and documents and stuff, and a lot of the way we interact with our apps, but there's no reason why you couldn't like connect to a server and have like a virtual space where you're chatting as well.
So a small little sort of business idea we had like a few years ago, I wanted to deploy, but, you know, there were sort of, say, bigger consequences of making that happen was essentially you have a lockbox for a text document, right? And then essentially people pay to see what's inside. And the issue with that is, you know, you're going to end up always having takedown notices, and it becomes a nightmare, right? It doesn't scale, whatever. But like now with this, I mean, you can have notes out there that are, you know, pay to open and they live, right? I mean, you know, GDPR is completely like made obsolete now. I mean, like, how are you going to tell relays to not have that information exist? I mean, maybe the ones that are in your jurisdiction, but things are going to become very weird and interesting. It's going to be hard to enforce copyright because the content is not necessarily dilutable. I think we're in for a paradigm change in how information ownership and that sort of like the consequence of that happen because of this new protocol.
There's a lot of people criticizing me on the GitHub, saying that I should provide a mathematical proof that the protocol is censorship resistant. And all I have is like that note on the README saying that there will be a Russian server somewhere.
But that's a completely fair explanation. I mean, that is it, right? I mean, there is no other way of doing this so simply, except for the fact that it's just like Bitcoin. We count on flag theory and on state actors having different interests, right?
Yeah, that's how I understood it, true. But these people, they wanted something academic. I don't know how to provide that, so I can't. That's why
someone will do it for you eventually.
Yeah, I hope.
It would be really cool to start. Like I think the catnip will start sort of kicking in soon, and you're going to start seeing a lot of very, very interesting people with very specialized skills coming into the Nostr sort of like core-ish development.
So this brings to mind something that I never considered, which is so there was an article, I think it was like the Indian Express or something, some large newspaper in India, and I was trying to think about like what would happen if like large percentage of India started coming onto Nostr, and what would that experience would be like, at least in Damas. I feel like we'd almost need a relay per region, because it would be very confusing. I don't know. I'm just trying to think of like, how does this scale out for the country?
Oh, so we have part of the NIP we want to propose does identify. So like essentially it's like a message for the relay on how to engage with the relay. The relay essentially identifies itself like for like region. And then you can find some sanity there. I mean, it doesn't have to be formal, but it would be nice if there was some way of identifying, with a 2 or 3 letter code for a country, because that's also going to have like, you're going to have like legal issues with relays, you're going to have all kinds of stuff, right? So, but I think like the solutions will present themselves. At least identifying the language could be nice too, right? Once you have a lot of clients, a lot of world penetration, like you want to be able to know what's coming in, but you could also have a filter relay that just translates everything to you.
Yeah, India is a very interesting use case because there's over like 300 dialects, and those dialects tend to have different cultural attributes as well. So it's not even the state understanding. It's more of the localized dialect and cultural attributes associated with that dialect.
Yeah, I didn't even know that. That sounds even more complicated.
And then you're going to have char set issues with clients, right? Like you have all these expanded character sets for like obscure languages or languages that just like your clients never had to deal with, and supporting them all at the same time might be a problem. Those are interesting issues.
Yeah, your idea of translating at the relay level is going to be pretty difficult considering all the messages are signed.
Yeah, but like maybe the trust model is different, right? Maybe you have some control over that relay and you're just receiving now clear text, right? Like maybe your client is even lighter than a normal client, right? It's just essentially doing text. It's not doing signed event messages.
That's one attack vector, I think. I'm worried about that. People doing clients like that trust a server and only talk to that server. That's one client called member.cache that's made by a Bitcoin Cash guy, I think. And it does like that.
How appropriate.
And I think his client is very fast because it's talking to a backend that does all the hard work on the backend, but it's also not very censorship resistant.
I feel like we could standardize a lot of that stuff, because I've been thinking about this for the stat spec, because we're probably going to need some aggregate REST endpoint that just, I'm not even sure it's a good idea to do it all at the protocol level, because we're going to need like lots of stats for different things. So maybe it makes sense to have like a spec that just pulls the stuff efficiently, so you can get kind of the gains that, because I noticed his client, it actually has like follower counts and like accurate counts for things. And it's like, because he's using a backend, but if we had that spec in somewhere, that might help clients out a lot.
But if you have like a no permission network, right? Like this is bound to happen, right? I mean, like Coinbase exists where they custody Bitcoin for a bunch of people that don't even understand that the Bitcoin is not theirs, right? I think you're going to end up in the same place. Like with freedom comes responsibility, right? Some people are just not interested in that, and they might just use, say, for example, Twitter decides to create a Nostr relay, and they may not be interested in delivering actual Nostr messages to their client. Now you have a marketplace of clients, which is great, but some people may choose to have a subpar, more filtered, more state actor curated version of the global feed, right? I don't like it personally, but I don't see a problem with that.
Not your keys, not your notes.
Exactly. Not your keys, not your notes, right?
I actually like it, but I do see a problem. So it's the opposite. I think it would be nice to allow people to do that, but I worry about it. I think centralization is a good way to lots of centralization aspects. Anyway, it's a good way to scale things and do things in custom ways that is not standardized. I also like these on a gut level, but I see there may pose some problems. But I think Nostr is fine against these kinds of attacks. Even if Twitter did this, I think just having a little amount of people not doing it would keep the protocol open.
So we've sort of went all over the place with Nostr, right? Let's talk about how do we win? Because, all technology can be cool, can be amazing for a subset of people, but winning at global level is a whole other ballgame. I guess there is one person on this call that has a little bit of experience with that. So Jack, how do we keep people interested in at least this use case of Nostr so that we can have a driving thing so that it attracts people, capital, and other things? What would be some lessons that you've learned building what you built for us to sort of create engagement, create stickiness, right? Because that was the problem with Mastodon. Nobody stuck it there. And sort of compound this, snowball this, and take over the world in the next month.
In the next month. Well, I mean, I think the open development model, the development in public, is absolutely critical. And that the discussion is happening over the protocol itself and the iteration and just the guidance that is being provided and the ideas is important. But I think it does come back to this idea of the net new thing here, as Fiatjaf has tried to amplify, is the interconnection and this concept of many micro apps solving different use cases or different problems enables so much more than just someone who's working entirely on social media, because there's more of an open field feeling. It doesn't feel like you're constantly competing to add, more bells and whistles to it, but you're actually bringing new utility to this new fledgling ecosystem. And someone might find it interesting and useful and valuable, and that encourages you to keep going with it. So I think, sensing Twitter, when we started, we just happened to be in the right place at the right time with a lot of bloggers, and that turned into journalists, and that kind of set the tone forevermore, as you see today. With Nostr, having what feels like a majority Bitcoiner type attitude will create an entirely new system, and I'm hoping that there'll be some point, and you're always starting to see a little bit of it, where the conversation around the protocol takes up, 1 to 10% less, and more topics emerge, and more use cases emerge, and that's what makes it, I think, attractive to more people. I think some of the people trying that right now are going to see a bunch of Nostr and Bitcoin talk and think that's what it's for. But the brilliance of the micro app idea is they don't have to see any of that. It's just providing them real value right away, instantly. And having these, little separate views on this giant, canvas I think is really cool and really important to getting mass adoption. But I wouldn't think about it as like, how do we get mass adoption on the social aspect? It's more mass adoption of these use of the micro apps together. Like, to me, like, success and winning is what's the N of, what number of people, what number of micro apps is any one person utilizing at once. That's where the stickiness feels like it's going to come in, is like, I may fire it for like the social thing because I have this other thing over here, but I'm going to continue to hire it to solve these problems for me. And that maintains a relationship with the overall protocol instead of like quitting the whole protocol altogether, which I think is a single point of failure in some of the other development models such as Mastodon and maybe even aspects of Blue Sky, where they're going after one particular use case, and if you're not getting value from that use case that's fundamentally new to you and valuable, then you're quitting the whole protocol. Whereas, at least with Nostr, you might find something else that's not social that you find value in. So you're not quitting the protocol; you're just quitting one little micro app of it. And again, like it's to me, it's fundamentally new in this time, and we're not even seeing a glimmer of it, just yet. Maybe a tiny bit, but there's so much more to come. We're definitely early.
So what you're saying is that you're going to keep on being the Nostr greeter and saying hi to every person that comes in.
100%. That just feels good. I mean, the other thing we learned from Twitter is like, if you're not getting some sort of like tangible feedback immediately, you're lost. So even if I hit like 10 people in the day, those are 10 people who have had some interaction with it where they're going to like look for the next thing. Like, okay, so something happened. Now what's the next thing and the next thing and the next thing? And I just think it's important that as it's developed in public, it's also like the interactions are very public too, because people can see it and they can feel it and they understand the potential when they feel it more. It's not abstract anymore. It's real.
I find that every successful technology has a culture, like a very sort of defined early culture that then waters down and disappears much later on. But in the early days, there's a culture, right? In Bitcoin, there were free Bitcoin taps. You go there, you get yourself some free Bitcoin. Everybody gave Bitcoin to their friends and family. Try this thing out. Everybody who got that Bitcoin for free lost it, but that's besides the point. And with Lightning, there was the Lightning chain, right, where people were giving to the next person.
Yeah, the torch.
That's right, the torch. And then there was the tips. And what these things all have in common is this idea that like you have a chain of humans, right, like sort of interacting with each other in one way or another, and make it friendly and interesting right away, like you mentioned there. So yeah, I mean, this is some interesting insight. What do you got, like JB, like you're building a client that's like fairly well used and sort of like becomes like this very clean experience for the system. Like, how do you see us winning short term? Like, how do we keep the momentum going?
I think it's just showing those novel use cases. It's you're not going to win people's attention if it's just like a crappier version of Twitter, because Twitter is pretty amazing. I love Twitter. I still use it. So we really need to be tapping into like these new things that really like blow people's minds, right? So that's why I love focusing on this lightning tipping feature, which I plan on adding soon, which I got working the other day, and just having like seeing people, tip on your post and seeing who it was. It's just, that's a new experience that I don't feel like has happened yet. But when you can start, and when you imagine like listing those in terms of like the highest tip on the post, now it becomes like this gamified aspect where people want to get to the top of the tip list, and like who knows what that's going to unlock. That's going to just be, people are going to love that, I feel like. So, and just like adding more things like Ellen Uralt widgets and just making it fun. I just want, if it's fun, then people are gonna just like love it, and like people already love it. But let's just make it more fun. Like that's the goal of Damus. So let's just make it maximally fun, and because we have that opportunity now where it's like we can just do it, right? So that's why I hope that we keep building is these cool, fun demos, because we want everyone to experience those fun things. So.
Yeah, I mean, for people who haven't tried like Nostr on Damas yet, or just the general like social aspect, social application of it, it is absolutely hilariously fun. I mean, like people are having a blast on this thing, and people are sticking around because of that.
You say that because you're using demos. You should be like me and use the most trash clients that people are making and try to make them better.
Yeah, well, some people are into masochism, I guess.
There are Android clients coming. So if I'll pose the same question to you. Like, what keeps the momentum going, and how do we win in the short term sort of aspect?
I have no idea. I think we need a few more jacks to give more boosts to the thing. And the actual use case I had in mind was just these people getting banned and by government and stuff. And I think we would be nice to get these people, these banned people into like, I think it would be nice to get other niches besides Bitcoin. And I know no one here agree with me on that, but but yeah, I think getting some other niches would be good. I was thinking that would be interesting to create a separate protocol called Nostr or whatever, and say like market it only for people that hate Bitcoin. And it's exactly like Nostr, but then it grows from the other side, and then when it gets bigger, we realize that it's perfectly compatible with Nostr. So they merge.
Nostr Cash or something?
Yeah, something like that.
Nostr Cash. You know, I do think that there's a lot of people that won't come until you have like a mute button, a block button. I think like most people want censorship. They just want their censorship. And then it's fair. I mean, like people may not want to see something that they don't want to see. And I'm sure it's coming.
I'm surprised I haven't really needed to implement that. Like people are generally pretty nice. Obviously, it's not going to scale forever, but I've just been putting off that feature just because I haven't like felt the need to do it to anyone.
I think it's because we have like-minded people. It's so early, right? Guys, I think we're reaching about 2 hours here. This is like an absolute amazing conversation. What other things like maybe I have missed that you think we should bring up? Like imagine like maybe this is the only 2 hours that somebody's going to get about Nostr. And I hope that because it's so early, I hope I can sort of like shove in as much as possible in terms of like aspects of this and angles of this. Because again, you know, protocols is a sales job, and I want like really, really quality people to come into the space and come early. Pure silence.
I think like in terms of like the sales job and marketing, like I think just showing more of this this micro app idea and showing more of those use cases, I think is important, because a lot of people coming in today will probably, the first thing they think of to build is going to be a client and a social client as that at that, and miss this whole other universe of potential. And having more conversation around like the importance of how all these things interrupt together and work together, I think is a little bit missing right now, because we're still in that, you know, that run from phase. So once those things are seen, you know, being able to amplify them and boost them and put more focus on it, you know, hopefully we'll see more people build these simple, tiny little things and get funding for it through you know, these respective foundations that JBF and Fiatjaf have created. And then they'll be talking about how they got that funding, which will encourage more people to do similar things. So I think that's one. And I think Fiat brought this up, but like you know, people are lazy, so they go to defaults. And the defaults that are built into the clients or the micro apps will likely create momentum that'll be hard to move away from. So this whole earlier conversation around relays and what relays are chosen and how those are rotated, or how you know, what people show up with, or what they see as a like, or what they see as a boost, or how they perceive what a note is on this one view versus another, I think is really going to set the tone, in the same way that like you know, the Shaka has set a more positive, welcoming tone. There'll be other things that other defaults that just kind of take a life of their own. So being super mindful of what's being built in, especially on William's side, as you cross the chasm of the App Store, someone's first introduction to this ecosystem is what you're presenting them, and it's going to stick. So anything that you feel is like a significant mistake at the moment that should be reconsidered, I think is important to at least think about that, because it's these momentums take over, and then there's all these new feature requests that have nothing to do with your original intent, and you get super reactive, and I feel like there are some points of failure there that I would think a lot more about.
So no pressure. No pressure.
I'm already kind of feeling that. It's weird because it's like there's so many users and they want certain things. I'm like, well, I was just trying to build a cool lightning tipping prototype, but now it's like, oh wait, these people just actually need a usable app that's you can actually use. So I don't know, it's interesting. I do want to keep to the roots though. I'm as a protocol maximalist, and I just want to build the best possible thing that demonstrates the power of the Nostr protocol. That's kind of always been Damus's goal. So hopefully I can stick to that. But yeah, what I want to see, someone should make a poker client for Nostr so we can play poker. So I'm just throwing that out there at the end.
You know that the original Satoshi client had poker in it, right?
Yeah, that's why.
It is fascinating how decentralized people cannot stay away from the poker.
Is that true?
Yeah,
I thought it was a joke.
No, if you clone the first commit, there's a poker client.
Yeah, it's very exciting, guys. I mean, listen, I think I want to hear just Fiat, I really want to hear your opinion on what do you see, if it's differ from everybody else on how we win. And I guess I just wanted to say that it's kind of special that the biggest most used client is made by somebody who is also just to bring Bitcoin terminology, like a core contributor, like somebody who actually cares about the protocol. I think that's kind of special. It's nice because you're going to have more consideration for that. But yeah, Fiat, what do you think? Same question to you. How do we win, and what do you think could be done?
I thought I had the answer to that. The answer is that I don't know. But
nobody knows.
That answer, I answered when I said that we need other niche, capture other niche of use case of people, actually other groups, other communities. I think Nostr can support other people, and yeah, but that's it. But also on the other point, I think it was a miracle that JB happened and like Nostr and started building good things. So I think we wouldn't have got anywhere without Demos. But yeah, I don't know how to win. I think Bitcoin is so far from winning that talking about Nostr winning is such a long thing. But it could happen overnight, probably.
Yeah, we're only 2 years into this thing. It's it's still pretty early.
Yeah, but a man can dream, right? I used to call Bitcoin an experiment up until 2-3 years ago, and I don't think it's an experiment anymore. I think it's winning in its own matter and its own pace. But there is many wins along the way, and I think you guys had quite a few already. So much so that the interest about this stuff is amazing. So, guys, I guess the last sort of thing that I wanna sort of us maybe address is we'll go around. First thing is if you are leaving somebody with something, right, like a thought, an ask, or a piece of information or whatever, let people know something that you want, that you need, that the protocol needs, and go with that, and then maybe just tell people where they can find you. Why don't we start with JB here?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so I've been working on this iOS client Damus, and it's open source. So if you go to damus.io/code, it'll redirect you to the GitHub, and then help out. And then we have this Nostr fund that I've been writing down all the names of everyone who's doing the most work and helping me, and I'm doing that with other clients as well. So if you just start contributing lots of code to all these clients, we're watching, and we're putting you on the list, the Santa list for the Nostr fund. So help out, and you'll get paid. So thanks Jack for providing that, and just help out and join the fund.
Fiat. Same thing.
Same thing. And also, please try to not bloat the protocol, because one client can make a difference and create bad things for the other client, like bad, what's the name of this? Anyway, one client can implement a thing that puts a burden on everybody else, and this kind of stuff, I think, should be carefully handled. And that's my request for people that are coming. And like, once all the features in the world, just please take care.
Don't back up your cat photos on the relays, please.
Right. I guess it's like, it's early. There's not a lot of SPAC. So it's like, be gentle, right? I mean, don't abuse the protocol until because otherwise things start to get closed down. Jack, how about you? Any final thoughts and how people can find you? I don't think they know.
Well, William said it earlier, which is keep it fun, keep it weird. As soon as we lose that, I think we lose some of the potential. And I have, no doubt that this will stay fun and stay weird, and that will be the driving factor. I mean, for me, my experience with Bitcoin is it just took me back to the old internet where it was fun, it was weird, it was, it worked sometimes, it didn't work other times. Bitcoin obviously worked from day one, but like the weirdness of it, and just like, I'm getting into this because it's fun, it's refreshing, and it feels new, and I can actually contribute to it in some meaningful way. And it doesn't have to be code. Like I think the thing that will help the client development the most, and also this idea of the micro apps, is getting more of the designers engaged, and around key management, around settings, around relays, around interactions. When they get in and they can pair in a frictionless way with an engineer, and more designers are hybrids, of course, but when you get that element in, there's just a new level of thinking. And I think the community thus far has set the tone for weirdness and this like joy that we experience when using it. And I just hope that we can persist that as long as possible, as more and more people come in, and as more and more utilities that are serious tend to be developed upon it.
Yeah. I mean, thank you so much, guys. This was an absolute blast. I love the conversation. I think we covered a lot of ground. Who knows, maybe we do another one of these in a few months from now and sort of like touch on like, where it's gone and where it's at. Yeah, so I encourage anyone listening to this that haven't sort of tried Nostr. There's a bunch of resources. We're going to put a lot of the links on the show notes. Download Damas or some other client, and do come say hi. It is very satisfying. Do try to change clients. It's also very satisfying. This protocol is, I don't know, it might have legs. And I think we got something special here. So with that, I think I'm going to sign off. And I'm going to put also information on how to reach out to each person here in the show notes. Thank you so much, guys. Thanks for listening. If you're new to the pod, make sure to listen to some very cool other episodes. Episode 15 about Lightning. Episode 11 about podcasting 2.0 and value for value. And we also had a hardware wallet security panel on episode 5. Don't forget to follow at Bitcoin Review HQ or get in touch on Telegram, Bitcoin Review Pod, or bitcoinreview@coinkite.com. We don't have a crystal ball, so let us know about your projects. Leave your Boostagram on this episode and we'll try to read it on the next episode. We've added more people to the splits. Now if you send us streaming sats, some of that go to opensats.org. And also to Citadel Dispatch with my guest, Odell. If you don't know much about Value for Value or Bitcoin Podcast 2.0, go to bitcoin.review/V4V.